Not here all day. Okay, I'll try. I gotta get connected here first. Okay. How's that? Can you all hear me okay? All right. Well, let's pray, and then we'll kind of jump into what we're doing here today. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. God, we pray your presence upon us, and thank you for calling us together as a community to grow in you, to serve one another. And I pray that you continue to guide us along the way that we are going, trying to follow your spirit, trying to become the church that you call us to be. Help us to be discerning, help us to be thoughtful and careful, but also courageous and willing to take risks and willing even to fail. Help us to learn from all that we are doing, and let it be a strength to us and to your mission in this world. Through Christ our Lord we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. So, before we all sort of scatter to the winds in the summer, which does seem to happen, I thought motorcycles going by.
Not the
I know it sounded like that plane overshot the the landing deck by a long way. So I wanted to try to get us together. This is kind of core leadership of the church. There are a few more people even who could be here, but at least trying to pass some things along. So together we are the vestry, the ministry roundtable, strategic design team, and vision team. This does not look like all of those people together, but that's okay. At least some of you are here from each of those groups, I think. And, you can help shore up where information falls through the gaps. We also are recording so that those who couldn't be here today, I'm going to try to encourage them to watch this so that we can at least try to be on the same page. There are a lot of moving parts moving right now. So really the purpose of our meeting today is to kind of try to orient ourselves to where we are in the process. And Lois has done a good bit of that today in worship service, talking about the strategic design team. So I'm hoping that I can just touch on those things a little bit again and maybe answer questions, respond in a little more depth to where we are in this process. And remember the why, about why we're doing all of this. And convey some kind of particular information to different groups here and test a few ideas with you all. And we are going to look at the calendar, though probably not in as much depth as maybe I had indicated before. It depends on how this goes. We're flying by the seat of our pants a little bit here. Okay, so what got us into this 18th month to 2-year project with Ministry Architects? And really, it's going to be longer than that in terms of what we've set in motion before. Sort of, the cultural change that Lois talked about is really kind of complete, and we've settled into some kind of new way of being around here. I think it's going to be a while yet. This is just that process with Ministry Architects is just getting us organized and sort of launching the ship. I do want to kind of keep coming back to that metaphor of the ship that Lois said, we're building the ship as we sail it today. It's very true. And there's helpful ways in which that metaphor, I think, might help us think about what we're doing. So we got into this because as she said, we're really outgrowing our structures. We'll come back to that organizational chart in a little bit, but you could see on the one side where we started, or kind of where we were at 2017 when I about came here, was that we had liaisons on the vestry who related to different groups. Most of those groups were not organized into like committees. There were just individuals doing things, and there were some groups, some organized committees. But they would talk to the vestry, and information would go back and forth between the vestry, but those ministries didn't talk to each other particularly, and there was less information going out to the whole parish. So it really was a kind of a challenge. So we began a process even before Ministry Architects of trying to improve some of our communications, trying to get a little bit of organization where, with a smaller church, there's no criticism of that, but when you're a smaller church, that's how it functions. You function more like a family, Somebody says, ooh, that thing needs to be done, I'll do it. And they do it, and then they do it for the next 10 years, next 20 years. And then suddenly, they move away and nobody knows how to do that thing because they haven't been involved in it, right? So you recognize this, those of you who have been here for a long time, that is the way a smaller church functions, and it functions pretty well when you're at the right size for that. But as you start to have more people, everybody, like the repository of knowledge of the whole kind of tends to be at the vestry level, and particularly in the staff and the rector. So then you're just, going every which way, trying to answer everybody's questions and trying to help orient new people, and it quickly gets quite crazy. So we were starting to get to the point where those who were in leadership, and particularly staff and me, were starting to run, like feeling like we were on a treadmill, and one that's like going a little too fast, so you're starting to slide back and feeling like you're going to slide off at any time. That is very much what we were feeling, in a sense, right before the pandemic. The church was, if you remember, like there were no seats at the 10 o'clock service. We were looking for parking spots. How can we quickly, what do we do? And wanting, what is going to happen if you aren't prepared to receive people and engage them is that they will go away because there's no place for them here. They don't see a way to connect. You might be friendly as all get out, which we were, but they don't know how to connect and build relationships with each other. We did have some things going on like the supper clubs, and that really helped. I think that's part of why it was happening. Those relationships were developing. But going from there into a deeper relationship, say where you're involved in some of the, walking with people and becoming disciples, really growing in your faith, serving in various ways, being involved in outreach. Those things, harder to figure out how to get into them. At a certain point, it's kind of easier because somebody just invites you and says, come along with me. But now we're at a point where even that is hard because there's too many people. Every week, almost every week, Barb can vouch, there's 3 or 4 new parishioner cards. Folks who say, have just come for the first time, at least that. One time, I remember not too long ago, Susie came out, she said, Sarah, there's a line at the welcome desk. People actually have to wait. So we really have to equip ourselves to be able to create a space, build relationships, so that what we have shared as a smaller church, we can continue to share as the church grows larger, and that people truly feel welcomed and can become a part of the parish. And then there's also the piece that Lois mentioned about being less like, oh gosh, people are here, darn it, what do we do? To, we have a plan for that. We have some thoughts about what, and we have some processes. So that's what propelled us to work with Ministry Architects. wanting to do that sustainably, to grow but prevent burnout while we do, and prevent fracturing. One of the other concerns that churches like ours go through as they're growing is that, and I've heard already, the concern raised, what if, I loved St. John's when we knew everybody's name, when we knew everybody. And what do we do now? I don't know everybody. Well, in a bigger church, you may not know everybody, but everybody needs an opportunity to be known, right? So that's the important piece. And you will still know a lot of people and have not just passing relationships, which is what is important, but have those meaningful, deep relationships with at least some people at St. John's, and that is kind of your community within a community, and those communities relate to one another. So that's the vision that we're working with, in part in terms of our internal, why we got into this. And we began, if you remember, this process with ministry architects, with the mission. Oh, I put the wrong link. Hang on. I was doing this late last night, linking things, and that always tells you not a good idea. So we did this work to try to say, okay, well, if we're going to go through this change, we need to articulate, the vision of the church that we are becoming and the ministry that we feel God is calling us to. And we need to kind of put our stake in the ground in terms of what does that mean for us here? What are we doing here? So that's how we came up with this. And these were words that we've been living with for a while. We just put it into more concrete form and said, yeah, that's our mission, our vision. So our mission is to cultivate a life of faith as we follow Jesus in the way of life-giving, liberating love, and inspire others to do the same. So we're going to try to live this way, and by our living and with others, inspire others to join in that process. What?
Is there some way we can get that out there?
Yes, all of that.
Or a sign or something?
Yes, that's all of part of what we need to do next. Okay. Yes. We've articulated these values as being kind of central. We want to be Christ-centered, inclusive, brave, and loving. And then we developed 3-year goals around, and when I say those values, it's not just that we want to be, those are words that struck us as what we already were becoming, both who we are and also aspirational. We can always grow more deeply into embodying these values.
Can you put the view as being page width so we can maybe see it better?
Well, I can.
Oh, much better.
Is that better? But my intention was not to have you read necessarily every word, but even there, maybe even the titles are better. Yeah, okay. So our values. And then we set about developing some 3-year goals as a parish, and they are, as you've seen and read and looked at them, they are, and had input in shaping them, they're definitely ambitious, and there's 8 of them. It might take us 6 years to develop what we've set out to do in 3. The timeline doesn't matter. It's much more about the vision. So we did come together in this Vision Summit to try to look at what were the primary areas that we really wanted to focus energy in. You can argue that 8 is too many. It might be. But, these were the things that came up again and again and again from folks in the parish as you all talked about, and we heard from you about what matters here and what you sense is life-giving, for us for the future. So I'm not going to get into the detail of these because we don't have all day, but we will get, you've probably seen these at least a couple of times, I hope. You will see them again. You will see them in great detail soon, and you will be engaged in thinking more deeply about them. I'm just kind of trying to take a 50,000-foot view and say, these are the areas. Worship, we want to continue to evolve and grow our worship services and options for worship here. If we get to the point where we're outgrowing the space, then we'll need to add another service. We're already looking, even this morning it was quite full already again. Music, hopes for the music program to continue to grow and develop. Children and family ministries, small group ministry. That really comes in response to the concern about growing, but still having a place to feel that we belong, we are known, and we know one another deeply. Empowering and equipping church members for ministry. Lois really spoke to that today. That's a large part of what we are working on right now, is that kind of infrastructure to help engage people, prevent burnout, all of that. And we'll get into that in just a little bit more in a minute. Community outreach and care of God's creation. All of that reflecting our sort of the outflowing of our life together and our call to serve, both the world around us and the people around us, as well as the creation. Parish care, we heard very distinctly that we needed to do some work in that area, that was a high priority to equip us to stay connected and be caring for one another. And that we need to look at our building and facilities because we're outgrowing we don't have any storage. The parish hall is teeny compared to the congregation as it's becoming. Before the pandemic, we were busting out of the seams here. There's not enough small group meeting spaces. Those are the biggest priorities that keep coming up again and again. So, everybody with me on where we are? Okay, so. So we've got this vision of a church that's engaged in all these ways, growing in all these ways, trying to be inclusive, brave, loving, Christ-centered, trying to embody that and spill over into the world with that. And that's all a great vision, but what's the blueprint for getting there? And this is where it's kind of that metaphor of building the ship as we sail is really helpful. This is kind of all right, I'm going to try to do this as a slideshow. That way it'll take the whole screen. There you go. So just to review, again, what Lois said, we have this kind of structure where, these are different areas, roughly, right? This is worship. This is pastoral care. This is fellowship. This is outreach. We had a creation care effort going. This is sort of administrative things of the vestry that we had in place. And then this is things related to children and families and youth. But we had all these little smiling faces are individual vestry people. And that's what I was saying before. There was an individual vestry person who was a liaison to all the different groups of outreach. And some information would go back and forth between them, but it sort of stayed insular, right? And then we tried, the first thing that I suggested in terms of a structural tweak was for us to separate out what we're calling the ministry roundtable from the vestry. One of the things that has happened over the last several decades in the church is that, your grandmothers and grandfather's church was one where the women largely did not work outside the home. So they had full-time lives devoted to the church, and the church was much more central to people's lives then, too. And so it was designed, the structures that we inherited from our forebears were designed for people that we no longer are. And so this was the first effort at trying to begin to create a division of labor that meant the vestry wasn't doing every last blessed thing or, holding it all together. So the vestry became focused on what I say is like broadly stewardship, a mission of stewardship. Stewardship of people, our people resources, stewardship of finances, stewardship of our building and grounds. So all the resources we have, and stewardship of our mission and vision as a community. That's the role of the vestry. So we had a finance committee. We didn't have a stewardship committee, so we formed one because that was really critical to start right away. There were some land use issues. Remember the developer wanting to come and buy the church property and all that. So we needed to have somebody responding to that. And we created this ministry roundtable and started to pull together some of the people who were doing all these different, what we call program ministries in the church. So not the stewardship ministries, but the people programs of the church. But what we had then was ministry roundtable that had somebody there was no one person who was in charge. Well, that wasn't true. There was one person. It was Helen Holt in charge of creation care. And there was a bit of a committee there. Some areas, though, fellowship, for example, there was no committee. There was some organization in some areas, but nothing overall. So we started to try to bring at least anybody who was leading in any of these areas come together and talk to each other about what we're doing. And it was great because suddenly there was collaboration, there were ideas like, oh, the youth are going off for a weekend. Maybe Sophia's sisters would like to pack them little snack bags and meet them in the parking lot and send them off with a blessing. Isn't that lovely? And maybe some older members of the church could come and teach the youth something, and maybe the youth could go do a pastoral care visit, like as a group go visit Al Hinton and bring them muffins and hear stories about all kinds of fun things and improper language for youth to hear. So, just began to talk to each other and coordinate, and we started doing some, started the e-news, or at least announcements, going out from the email, all that kind of stuff, just trying to get some organization around us. So that was the first couple of years. And then right around this year, where you can see this developing, it's even further, right? So the ministry roundtable still encompasses, we tried to just pick somebody from some of those groups that didn't have one person in charge so that they could come and talk to each other. But we've started to develop more people, more teams working on the stewardship piece through vestry and a little more organization around the program ministries. And now this is kind of what we're hoping where we'll land by 2024. The big difference between this one and this one, so where we are now and where we'd like to kind of be, we hope, in a few years, is that there will be fully functioning committees of the vestry, which doesn't mean they're all vestry members on them, but they relate directly back to the vestry, report to the vestry's overseeing, and usually there's at least one person from the vestry on those committees or teams. That's one big change, and the other being the ministry roundtable would, instead of having that circle kind of everybody, it would really be, there'd be one person in each one of these areas solidly identified as kind of the person who knows about the rest of the area and is connected with those leaders enough to be able to speak, kind of update others about what's going on, and come together in the ministry roundtable. So the ministry roundtable isn't 40 people. It isn't that now, but it's like 8 people. And then those people are communicating back anything that needs to be communicated. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Does it reflect to you what the process we actually have been going through, and you see that reflected in what?
I don't see staff or rector up there. Does that fit anywhere?
Well, that's a good point. So back in this, that's one of the reasons why we got into ministry architects was the recognition that the church was becoming, because the more and more you do, you want to go to somebody who knows, who has kind of a view of the whole thing to say, where do I do, what am I supposed to do with this? Everything was getting very focused on staff and clergy, and we're there. I mean, probably I should fit us in somewhere, but it's kind of like we're in the air and in the water around all of this, I think, is kind of the idea. Not at the center of it, but we're going here and there and around, supporting, blessing, encouraging, helping to problem solve, not running the whole thing. I will tell you that my goal, I don't know when it will be that, it'll be time for me to move on from St. John's. I don't know when the right time will be, but that when I go, I would like to be able to know that the church is going to go on, like that everybody doesn't just sort of wait to say, oh, we got to wait for the next rector to tell us, to lead us. That you all will just be going. You'll be going and going. And that the rector, it isn't about the rector moving everything, but it is about that the rector supports and encourages and helps articulate, the vision that you all are moving by, reflecting that back to you and supporting here and there where there are weak spots, where there are things that are newly developing and that kind of thing. Yes, Elizabeth.
What do the boxes indicate?
So the boxes indicate like an actual structure, like a committee or a team or people that meet together to do something. So way back in here, the Altar Guild existed that way, the Flower Guild, but like the Acolytes, all those, like, they just operated kind of like little amoebas floating around. There was a finance committee, but there wasn't a stewardship committee, so the campaign would happen by like 1 or 2 people coming together and getting it going. So that's the difference, that's the boxes. And so the dashed boxes means they're in development. Solid line means there's at least something you could like stick a pin in and say like, oh, that actually exists. Look, they have a meeting on the calendar. So 2022, so like now, you see there's a lot of, I put dashed lines not because, like around creation care, because I would say it's still in formation in the sense of like moving probably, or any of these probably are not where they will be 3 years from now, but there is some organization. But there's very little in fellowship, for example. So that's why I didn't put anything around that. Does that make sense? Okay.
Sarah, are the strike-through items ones, groups that have not been meeting because of COVID?
Yes, thank you. Yeah,
Not like cancel forever?
correct, but on hiatus.
Uh-huh.
They were.
'Cause I like hot dogs.
Well, then we might have to put you to work helping to get a group together.
Well, and so the other point is, this chart was developed when in November?
Right, so
So we've progressed further.
we
than
have,
the chart is.
yes, and I haven't updated, I didn't go backward and update this. I just tried to move forward. And so, and again, there's still not, these aren't all fully formed, but by the 2024, hopefully there'll be some there for all these areas.
And I see that from the 2022 to the 2024, you went from just having the Sunday school under formation to actually having children and family ministry.
Correct. So,
More accurate.
yes. So Sunday school was, we had one person who would volunteer to get a bunch of teachers together and, try to pull off Sunday school. And now, thanks to Stephen being here this year, he has helped to form a Children and Family Ministries committee, that is, or a team. That is, I'm trying to get away from the word committee because it is very a top-down kind of word. But a team of people who will continue to, and that takes time, right? Because that group of people has never done that before. They don't know how to run a Sunday school necessarily. So it takes like passing knowledge along and training and support. And hopefully some of these lines, some things may not come back. That is a reality. But we've seen most of these things are coming back in one way or another.
Parish care, is that sort of pastoral care and it's affiliated?
Yes, so the term that we've used historically in the church is pastoral care, but that puts the pastor at the center of the word, where what we're trying to say is that that's a ministry of all of us. There is a role for a priest or a deacon in pastoral, caring for one another. There's a very specific kind of sacramental role, and there's times when it's, you or I or Philip need to show up. There's lots of other ways in which we can care and support for each other, and the basis, like you all can do a lot more than any one of us can do. So we just need to shift our focus to thinking that way, right? And organizing that way.
And as you move further into your small groups will become an extension of that parish care as well.
Exactly.
Because they can let you know when somebody's going to the hospital.
Exactly.
They can get that information.
And they have relationships such that, that. I mean, those of you who've been here for 40 years, the other people who've been here for 30 and 40 years are some of your closest friends. So when they're in the hospital and you take a meal and you do that. Yes?
To help Philip, right now, there's a sign up Genius out to get meals for family that needs them. So that
Yeah.
goes on.
Yes, exactly. So there's development of, there's organization in many areas, but there's more to do to fill that out. Exactly. Any other comments or questions?
I would assume that safe church training would be part of pastoral or parish care. Is that something that could be on that, instead of it just being on its own off to the side?
Well, so this is all judgment calls, right? Like that we have to make together. I put that under, and I'll show you a little more granular detail here in a minute, but I actually put that under vestry because it's a kind of a, it's stewardship of it's like risk management, if you want to say it that way, right? It's making sure that we are keeping our people safe. So it's part of that ministry. You could think of it as parish care too. I mean, there's nothing wrong with
I
that.
don't know if it was going to be part of something bigger.
It is. So that's actually a good place. So let me just, before I jump to the next thing, ask if there's any more, just any thoughts, any questions more that you want to say about this. Just trying to paint a picture of kind of, and when I shared this with the vestry, at our vestry retreat this year, everyone said it was kind of like a light bulb going off, like because it really did help orient to what are we aiming for in terms of this structure. Okay. So I'm going to just jump down real quick. I'm going to come back to that, but there's Lois mentioned that we are creating the volunteer accelerator, the ministrymatch.com, and that we're doing all of these role descriptions and team descriptions and describing everything on the planet in this church, so that we can feed it into this matchmaking thing. So this is a spreadsheet of all of, there are going to be links. There are already links to almost everything. But you can see right here, this is everything that relates to the vestry, not only organized groups like the finance committee or team and this stewardship team, and building and grounds, which we hadn't had before. We had one person, the junior warden, doing everything or calling a couple people to help, but not a group. So it has both groups, organized groups, and individual roles, like liaison to the preschool board. That's just a very specific job that somebody on the vestry needs to do, to go to the preschool board meetings and relay information back and forth. Safe church training coordinator, a little specific job that somebody needs to do on the vestry that makes sure that everybody who's meeting with children, serving children, meeting with older adults alone in their homes, that we have that kind of safety training in place. Does that make sense? So you can see in the dark pink or salmon color all the different groups. This is just a less visual, more spreadsheet format of everything you just looked at. And then each of those areas, like building and grounds team up here, that's the committee or team. This is the team leader description, job description, team member job description. So we're breaking it down into that kind of, and it's driving me crazy. I just have to be honest. If anybody told me in seminary that I would be spending hours and hours doing this, I would have run for the hills. This is not my favorite thing to do at all, but and I'm trying to get to involve all of you in it because it's really more than one person can do. And, but it has to be done. And it's just something that once it's in place, we can revisit it once a year, tweak it, update it, add things here and there, and it just becomes such a foundation for us to work from. Because I can click on the building and grounds team, and there'll be a way to make this accessible to the whole parish, basically through this volunteer accelerator, where they, what will come out of this is that you take a 20-question questionnaire, and we're going to actually sit and do this in church. We're going to do something terribly un-Episcopalian, invite you to all bring your devices to church. And we're going to take 10 minutes in the middle of announcements and ask everybody to pull up this 20-question questionnaire. It takes 5 minutes to complete, 7 minutes. But it spits back to you, like, you like working with youth. Oh, you might want to be, consider this group or that group or this thing or that thing. And it's remarkably accurate. We tested it like 5 or 6 times with different groups so far, and it's just beautiful. It really is beautiful. And then, but you can go wander around on this thing and say, there's a building grounds team. Let me see what that's about. And you click on that, and that's the goal. What are they really responsible for? The main things. What kind of skills and talents would it take? Term of service, how long am I committed? And so this one is still in development, you can see. But what training and resources are there for me to get equipped with this job? Is anybody going to show me what to do, or am I on my own, out on a limb? Who do I report to? Who do we report to as a group? And then who's the contact? So for every last blessed thing, we're filling out one of these things. And even for some we don't have. Like, we don't have any kind of disaster response. What if something happens? What if a really bad hurricane hits and there's major damage to our buildings? We don't have a plan. What if communications go down? We're not organized in any way to check in on each other. It's important for organized groups and communities to have those kind of connections. So the diocese is really encouraging us to do this. So we got one more thing to do on top of everything else. These are all the different roles. So that's just vestry related, as pink and light pink. And then we've got ministry roundtable and sort of all the program ministries. These are the teams. And so there's a lot of new language coming along. None of this is set in stone, but we're just sort of trying to reflect and make some things consistent. So we've had an altar guild and a flower guild forever. Well, all the rest of the worship things, we're just calling them guilds because that's what we called the other ones, right? But as we develop some organization, There is a verger guild now, and the vergers, as they grow into their role, so they are the ones who actually are, we have to help the parish to understand that they're the ones that you would come to if you've got like a last minute thing before worship, or somebody got sick and we need a new reader, or the acolyte just fell down and broke his leg, you know, whatever, and we need somebody else to fill in. That way, the clergy can focus a little more on trying to be present for leading worship and not running around like a chicken with their head cut off, trying to take care of all kinds of details right before the service. So, vergers, and then Marcia, I haven't even laid this one on you yet, but you know, I was thinking we might call the organization around the music program being a music guild or musicians guild. It all ties together in one way or another, and there does need to be a little bit of organization, which largely you provide, but as the church gets bigger, and Marcia's been served in churches that have gone through exactly this process that we're going through multiple times of growing into more, you know, sort of organizing in more particular detail as you go along. So none of that will be new to you. So then, you know, each of these is then broken down here into multiple different little jobs. So the parish care team, this is a perfect example of how we didn't have any real like central committee or something that did that was over pastoral care or parish care. It was the rector, and then Maggie did meals, and so did this, and so did that. And when we would be aware of a need, either Barbara or I would call those people, and they would activate their people. But there are a lot of places falling through the cracks, right, because there weren't things that we're doing. So we're wanting to do more. But it doesn't have to be a committee that gets together and makes a central plan that then gets, you know, sort of imposed upon the church. I actually think it's a great thing that we had this little group that does meals and a little group that visits folks, and we've got the lay Eucharistic visitors, and we've got these. So we don't have to make a committee. Why make a committee when you don't need a committee? Don't do that. Because they can kill you. But just have one person. So we asked Kitty, and this may work, and we may come 3 years down the line, we may say, we need something more of a committee, or there's something that this doesn't quite work. So we're going to have to tweak these along the way. But what we've started down this path where we've asked Kitty to be basically a parish care coordinator. So she meets weekly with me and Barb, and because we tend to be the ones who know, you know, like people tell us when there's a need. And so then we decide which of our teams that are already kind of in place or individuals doing things should we invite to respond. Should we have somebody send a card, a nice handwritten card, or make a call? Should we have somebody visit? Should we get communion going? You know, does this person need to be referred to bereavement counseling? You know, so there's little teams that can start to work on just one thing and develop that nicely, right? Instead of having one committee that's trying to do everything and then therefore not really doing that much and not really having that much fun doing it either. So now have I gotten this enough just so that I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I just want you to have a picture clearly of what the direction we're going. And again, that some of this organizational structure, it really is like somebody has to think up what's the structure that fits the ministry that we're trying to do. So that's largely the strategic design team. I'm coming to them with an idea of like, shall we do more of a network here than a committee? Does that sound like it'll work? Okay, let's ask Kitty if she'll be the coordinator, and let's start writing job descriptions for all of those things. But again, it's like that's we can tweak it as we go along. We can change it to fit what we need. But we're trying not to put a structure, impose a structure on every area and try to say, make it the same. We need a committee that does this, a committee that does that. It just doesn't work in the way our world works anymore. So I hope that both kind of splits the difference or brings together the goals of empowering lots of people and still keeping them together and coordinated, if that makes sense. So, it doesn't have to be a small group of people who are making every decision and doing everything. More people can be empowered, but we have a way of coming together on a regular basis in the ministry roundtable to coordinate those efforts so we're not stepping on each other's toes, so that we know we're not both trying to use the same room at the same time, or plan some big event at the same time on top of each other. Okay. So,
Sarah, there's a box up there you need to get rid of. There you got it.
okay, it wasn't on my computer, it was on the TV then, okay. So, to come back, just again, the goals of all of this, to keep a bigger group of diverse people together as one, communicating with each other, having a vision that we're moving toward together, coordinating with each other. I mean, what is the vision that Jesus had for the church, was that we would be one. That is very hard to attain, when you have lots of moving pieces. A shared ministry. There's an idea since the Reformation of the priesthood of all believers. That is, it is not just the clergy who do the ministry of the church, not even by a long stretch.
Amen.
Yeah, it is the reason why we repeat our baptismal vows over and over again whenever somebody is baptized is so that we all claim that ministry. It is our basic ministry as Christians that the church does. And our church has a tendency to be too clerically centered, too enamored of its priests, and thinking that the priests are the ones that should set the next.
Be enamored with our priests.
Okay. You know what I mean. But thinking that the ministry is what we do is volunteer. What lay people do is volunteer, and what clergy do is minister. No, it's not broken up that way. It's all ministry. And it's one of the reasons why I hate the term for this new Match.com thing is volunteer accelerator, which I can't stand. I wish it was ministry accelerator, because that really is what it is. Okay. So decentralized, less pastor-centered. I'm sort of repeating myself a little bit. Here's one thing you said over and over again that we heard, going into this is that 20-80 rule has gotta change. Every organization just falls into that if you're not very deliberate and build leadership out. That 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And unless you're very deliberate, it's just always going to be that way. So you have to create leadership and structure to divide labor and spread it out. And then the other piece of one of these goals is to equip ourselves with the right technology, and Lois mentioned that. So there's a couple of particular pieces of information that I wanted to make sure that I convey to you, because you'll be some of you have already received an email from me or from somebody else asking you to help with a job description or a team description. If you get one and you have no idea what to do with it, let me know. But I'm trying not to send things to people that they don't know anything about. I'm trying to take on the ones that are probably newer things that we haven't yet have in place. but that we think we may need soon, so that those are written out and ready to go. But the role, there are 2 new groups, and if you remember back on the organizational chart, the equipping team and the vision team, these are both new groups that relate to the vestry. So the vision team is going to be a group of people. Their job is to take those parish goals that we have, work with all the various leaders of the ministries that are doing pursuing those goals, responsible in a sense for those goals, and then helping them checking in with them, because the next thing we need to do is develop like milestones. By the first year of these 3-year goals, we want to be here. Second year, we're hoping to be here. Third year, that's how we get to the final goal. So we need both sort of milestones and mile markers in a sense. So are we gonna, if we're trying to say that we really want to engage more of our parish in the work of outreach and creation care, then we got to make a stab at saying, okay, we're going to measure that by how? People showing up to some event that's to serve meals or to come to the garden blessing or do some gardening out at a community garden, and we're going to just keep track of that. And the purpose of this is not to then come for the vestry or leadership of the church to come back to those leading in those areas and say, what's the matter? You've only got 50% instead of 70% of people involved. What's the matter with you? What are you doing wrong? It's just kind of Michelle Ritchie brought this up in our meeting. It's kind of like what you said in the back seat on your way to, on a summer trip. Are we there yet? How do we know if we're there yet? The mom and dad are going to say, watch for the McDonald's on the left. That's when we know we'll be 30 minutes from grandma's house. It's just to help us orient. So the vision team, their role is to keep us focused on proceeding toward what we envision we're about and help us, just keep track and communicate to the parish and the community, who are we and where are we going as a parish? What are we about? What are we doing? And so the annual parish report is going to be one way in which they help to do that. And here is another area that I want to suggest, another place where they may gather some information and then reflect it back to the parish and help us understand where we are. This spotlight on ministry, both of these teams, the vision team and the equipping team, will have a little bit of relationship to this thing I'm suggesting as spotlight on ministry. You know how during stewardship time, we've had people do testimonies, basically ministry moments, we've called them. So this is actually, the idea is to spread this out throughout the whole year and divide up our ministries into 12 months, different areas, and take a month and spotlight one of those areas so that every year parish care has a month and creation care has a month. And we put some things together that are on the vestry, like communications and IT, put them together so that basically everybody gets a little chance to share the stories and what's happening in these ministries with newcomers, half the time when you're in a bigger church and there's a lot going on, people don't know what's going on. They don't read everything, and you can't put everything in the news. So it's an opportunity to kind of share the highlights and the great stuff that's going on. Sorry, I'm losing my train a little bit here. So we thought if each of these areas has a month, and in worship, we focus on that ministry and we pray for that ministry in particular, that's the time in the year when your ministry we can say, these folks are kind of retiring from the ministry. And so we celebrate and thank them for their service. And these new people have come on, and welcome and thank you for your willingness to take part in this. And we tell stories about that and just celebrate that as a community. And then the harder part of this is that each of those ministries would have the responsibility of helping to host coffee hour. But the reason for that is, again, sharing the load. And it's not that hard if we just do something simple. And each area should really only have 3, if not, shouldn't have all 4 weeks of the month to do that, because we are hoping that we might be able to get that hot dog Sunday back going again. And so it spreads it out, shares it, and gives us an opportunity to celebrate that in worship. So building and grounds and communications and IT will have June. It's now June. We can't do it quite yet, but maybe we will be starting in July with vestry. I've got a whole schedule here. I'll share that idea. I've shared this with the ministry roundtable, but there were only about half of us there at that meeting. So I'm wanting to get this out to you all and just test this idea. Do you think that is a good plan as a way to celebrate? I see a thumbs up in the back. As a way to keep those ministries always before us, everybody have a chance to be visible.
I think it's a great idea, and the amazing thing is, I distinctly remember us talking about this years ago.
Yes, it was an idea, it's a great thing, but it takes organization. And what we didn't have was...
And it just underscores what we're trying to do now.
Right. And so this group right here, the equipping team, will be, part of their responsibility will be to oversee that calendar, remind people that it's their month coming up. So could you please think about those 2 or 3 people who need to come do coffee hour? And those folks will have a green, St. John's green, apron on, so that you're identifiable in the parish hall. And people will know, it's parish care that's doing it this month. And so if I am interested in, I'm a therapist, a retired therapist, and I could do a grief group. I know who to talk to about that, and I can grab them in the parish hall. So.
Is your idea still for that group to say something during announcements?
Yes, yeah. So during announcements, we'll tell those stories, and there'll be opportunities to put faces with ministries and that kind of thing. But that's just one piece. So the spotlight on ministries, keeping up that calendar, making sure that we do something in worship to celebrate those folks. And then they're the ones who are responsible for getting this volunteer accelerator launched, and for coming up with a process then of what do we do with that. So, because what we'll have at the end of that process, once we have the volunteer accelerator ready to go, is that you could take the questionnaire and you get spit back a list of things that you could do and be involved in, and the ministry leaders have a list of names of people they could call and say, hey, I understand you like building things, or you know your way around plumbing equipment or whatever. Would you like to do this?
I'm just having the thought that if people, say from the vestry, are wanting to engage the people at the coffee hour,
Mm-hmm.
but are busy in the kitchen, that maybe it would be worth considering having
Other people.
a different group take care of the kitchen duties,
Mm-hmm.
and have the vestry available to reach out to the congregation. And at a later time, the vestry can do the kitchen for another group. Just so that the vestry is available, or,
Mm-hmm.
whoever the group
Whatever
is,
group. Mm-hmm.
so that they aren't distracted by, I can't help you right now, I've got to pour the coffee. I can't help you, I've got to,
Yeah, that's a thought.
to free them up. So
Uh-huh.
just a thought.
Okay.
Can you explain when you say leading coffee hour, what you actually
hosting coffee hour. So what I mean by that is, one thing we kind of argued about a bit around here before the pandemic, before we ceased coffee hour, was how fancy coffee hour was getting, how there were times where like people bringing whole like dishes to pass, every week. That doesn't need to happen. And, that's kind of, the idea is to kind of keep it simple and then have those bigger feasts for, when we have the bishop come or special occasions. So really just bring some cookies, bring something for people who can't have sugar, fruit, cheese and crackers. So you really only need 2 or 3 people. There will be a kitchen. So Durbin is already kind of our kitchen coordinator. We're going to give her that role, like title. And then she will make sure that there are beverages, so coffee and lemonade and water and stuff. So it would just be a matter of 2 or 3 people who, would take care of that each Sunday. You're responsible for it. Come set it out, clean it up, and help with the cleanup of the beverages and stuff. So it's not that complicated. Probably only 2 or 3 people are needed. So that's why I was thinking that it might not be such a bad thing to put those together, because you set things out and you've got time. You don't have to.
I was gonna say, it's not a feast, and they won't.
If it's not a feast, you don't have that many dishes to do. It's not like you're gonna be stuck in the kitchen the whole time. So we could try it and see, and then if it's not working, we can figure out another possibility. But that was the idea. So does this make sense?
Yep.
Okay, so when somebody calls you and says, it's worship's time, when Elizabeth calls and says to those who serve in worship, which is everybody who serves, readers, greeter, every job, she could call on you, because you're under that area, to see if you would be willing to host coffee hour. Don't be surprised. That's the whole point of me sharing this with you now, is don't be surprised. And don't be surprised when we then ask you also to talk about being an acolyte, or talk about being, a chalice bearer and how meaningful that is, or serving on the altar guild, so that people can hear from you about a ministry that's often very silent and hidden, right? So
Sarah, does that mean that we would have somebody speaking every Sunday at the announcements?
So I'm going to say that it's probably not going to be every Sunday, because in the flow of our life together, there are just some Sundays, like today, where there were just too many things on the list, in a sense, right? And so it might not make sense. So that one might not be a good one. But 3 out of 4. So there's opportunity. You don't get just one crack at it. You have 2 or 3 minutes on children. So we're doing formation 1 month. We could do 2 or 3 minutes or 4 minutes on children and families, and we could have another Sunday talking about youth and another about adults. You see? So
it would become sort of a regular part of the liturgy.
yes, during announcement time, essentially. Yes, Sarah.
Would this be for both services or just for one?
That's the tricky part. Yeah, that's the tricky part. Or all 3 services if we have a 3rd service. Yeah, well, what's interesting is that if Elizabeth Melvin isn't here, or I would tease her outright, but she, if you may, Keneal is here, I can tease you. So at Christmas time, we put these two, this monitor, and we had another one, we put them on the walls to show the Christmas pageant, which was digital this year again. And I was hoping that we might just leave them there. Cover them when they're not in use, but leave them there, because that would be a way, if somebody did it came and did it at 7:45, we could video and show the video at the next 2 services, instead of the person having to come to 2 or 3 services to do it. So we may find that it's not workable and that there's got to be another way we do this, but we'll see. So.
Well, we appreciate very much that you were willing to compromise and to.
Take down the monitors. Yes, so I heard from some of our stellar pillars of the church, our church ladies, who said, no, we are not having those in the church. And I said, yeah, okay. So Yeah, it's tough, you know, it's,
That's where the vision committee gets its work, and they cultivate the idea, and then it'll happen.
over Keneal's dead body. I know. It's a very hard leap for Episcopalians. So we have to balance all these things. Our traditions, our type of worship, our need to communicate with each other.
But just wait till we get the band.
Right. Okay, so we have a vision team that's going to be working on milestones. So if you are working in if you're a head of a ministry area and you get a call from somebody in the vision team and says, I want to sit down with you and let's talk about creating some milestones, you will not be surprised, right, when that happens. That's because we have to break down those goals and have measurable, you know, and think about how we're going to track where we're going. None of it is meant to be punitive. If it feels punitive, cry uncle. I'm serious. I want you to talk to me. I want you to talk to somebody on the vestry or the vision team or strategic design team, because that is not the purpose. You know, to nail things down so tight that people feel like they can't breathe. But just to have some direction and a path.
Like putting candles on birthday cake, just so you kind of know, oh, it's another birthday.
Yes, exactly. And so you understand what the vision team's doing and what the equipping team is doing?
Yep.
Essentially, from how I've described those two things? Anybody want to put a hand up to say I'm not quite sure? Okay, I don't want to overdo it. Okay, so we've covered all of that. So those were the main things in terms of this building the ship as we go that I wanted to make sure we were mostly on the same page about. I also mentioned that, and Lois mentioned that we are trying to do this 18-month ahead look. So how did that happen? You guys, I messed up all my links. I'm going to get it right here. Watch this. There it is. All right. So I sent this link out. This is a shared document that can be, you can put comments in, and then I look at those comments and either accept them or let you know that there's some issue. So this is, rather than sitting here for another hour and trying to put this all together, I suggest that we, does everybody remember, do you think you can find that email where I sent you the link to this? Okay, it is continuing to grow, this document, so it's not just a snapshot, it is a working document, and I've added those who already put comments in, I've added those things, or I've sent notes, put notes in with questions. I think I resolved all the questions that I had. I put in this document some spots where there's question marks. So I put those question marks, usually I put them on both sides, so they really stand out, or I highlighted them. We don't know, that one's not anchored yet. We gotta move it.
Right, and I wasn't even sure whether I was supposed to put meetings in there since this was major events. Wasn't sure.
Yeah, it could go either way. But you know what? What we don't want is to have a big event in a week where we've got 5 other big committees meeting. So I think it does help to have a little bit of that on there, at least some of the bigger groups. So I put dates. Sunday dates are in red. Anything happening on a Sunday is in red, so you can see the things that are piling up on a Sunday easily. And down here at the very bottom, so this goes 18 months out. Oh, let me show you one more thing. So at the bottom, this is December 2022. I put notes, either, things that apply to the whole month or just like not to a specific date, or notes about, okay, the parochial report is due on, when is it, March 1st. every year. So I put that in March. I put it in the month before, so it's like kind of an anchor for the vestry to know what are the key dates for the vestry. So then I put down here at the very bottom, this will be a working document also, and I put a line through everything that's already made its way onto the calendar, and so check it's calendared. Parish-wide calendar items, so we can come back to this year after year and say, we got to get those dates in there, remember. And then like sacraments and sacramental preparation, baptism dates, baptism preparation class dates, Holy Communion retreat for children, all these things, daylight savings, bishop's visitation, parish-wide fellowship events. We don't have all of those in there. That still needs. So if it's got a yellow on it, then it's not quite done yet. So you can go in. I mean, you know if you've given me your dates or not, right? So I put every one of our areas in. So we got vestry. I put vestry dates in. Building and grounds. We'll want to, at least target a month when we're going to do the review of insurances. Communications, that group doesn't exist yet, so they don't have any dates to put on there yet. Equipping is information, but we've got spotlight on ministry and mission dates, and we've got, I stuck on there a clergy and staff appreciation, because we can't appreciate all of you and then not have the staff appreciate it. Facilities planning doesn't exist yet, but we'll have some dates on there someday. Finance. So these are all the vestry committees, groups, and then all the ministry roundtables. So you see we're having this kind of division between vestry and ministry roundtable in everything in terms of keeping our information flowing together. Have I totally confused you, or is that clear? Clear as mud? So down, if you just keep scrolling down until you find your area. So creation care is right here under ministry roundtable teams. And so these are dates that I assume, we want to schedule. And if you have new things that you want to schedule, you put it down there if you want us to remember it year after year, and put it on the upper, wherever you want it in the calendar, in the comments, so that we can discuss it if there are conflicts or whatever. I can't think of a better way to do this, otherwise we're going to be together for like hours and hours trying to, right? So those of us who are kind of looking after this calendar will be in touch if there are, you'll see as it's building if there are lots of things, so you might want to say, maybe I'll do that on a different date. Or talk to us because, maybe there's something we could work out to make things work together. Okay? All right, so we got this big structure coming down, and we've got a calendar, and there are communications changes. We've had a communications audit. Really wonderful group worked with us, gave us very actionable, within our budget, doable tips for sort of improving our communications. So as we go along, there'll be some changes communicated, and tips essentially for improving how we communicate with different audiences. And I left this blank right here. We have, you've heard about Realm. Realm is something that we are still trying to figure out. It's really good and it's clunky in some ways. So there are some things we're going to use it for. We thought it was going to be one of those does all things, like one of those tools that has 30 things that you can use for anything. No, not quite. But it is powerful, and it's just, we're still sorting out exactly what we can use it for. We don't want to get everybody together and do a big training when we, don't know how to use it 100% and aren't sure that that's where we're going to land. So still working on that. And then there are IT changes coming, but it's not anything that you're necessarily going to see. It's just that the security of our infrastructure for information will be better. And weird things are happening, we keep getting kicked off the internet in the office and stuff, and that it's just, things are out of date and need to be managed better. We need to have support. The number one thing that came up when we met with the staff and talked about what drives you crazy about your job was that how much time we spend trying to solve computer issues and don't have any support, to call, pick up a phone. There's no help desk at St. John's. So we're working on getting a help desk so that we can free up more time and be more efficient. All right, so that's all the stuff. And the next steps were just that, don't be surprised when you get asked about milestones. Don't be surprised if you're asked for input about job descriptions and team descriptions, or when you are asked to bring your device to worship so that you can fill out this volunteer accelerator. And so when the person in the pew next to you gripes and says, what are we doing what do you mean we have to bring our phone or our tablet to worship? Why are we doing that? You can say, it's not that bad. It's only going to be 10 or 15 minutes, and it's a really, you can speak to why we're doing it. All right.
Could we do it after service, right?
Well, their recommendation was that we do it during service the first time. And it's going to take several weeks till we get most people to fill it out. So we'll do it after church the next few times. But we got to start with a really big bang.
Once they're in here.
That's right. We lock the doors and we say, you don't leave until you fill out this questionnaire.
This may be a dumb question,
Yeah.
but is 100% of our membership
Computer literate? There are a small handful of people we don't have an email address for. Very small, like 2.
That's small.
Just a recommendation. I thought what Lois did today was exceptionally good.
Yes.
But I also think that it could, and I'm not saying it did, but it could have caused some or a lot of the group to feel, oh my God, all of this going on, where in the world do I fit? Mm-hmm. And it might be a good idea for maybe once a month or something to have you or Lois take 3 minutes or 5 minutes just to say, last month we showed you that crazy chart and all of this, but guess what we've gotten done this past month? People, I'm just not sure that people in general in our church really have a sense of the incredible progress we're making in getting ourselves structured and organized and all of that. Just as a thought.
And what their connection is with it.
Well, we've also not wanted to not do information overload and be talking about it every single month up here. So, I don't know, that's one of the challenges that we talk about at the strategic design team is what do we need to communicate? When do we need to communicate it? What's the best way? Certainly we'll take that back and talk it through.
I mean, won't it be effective when you have, when we get to the point where you're doing the 3 times a month discussion of the program in the church? That will be self-explanatory. They're satisfied that. I think the majority of people don't really need to know the structure. They just need to know.
Yeah. Yes, but some people who are kind of partly involved, like involved in ministries but not involved in leadership, we shared that organizational chart in part so that they could kind of see that where they fit in that, if that makes sense. I'm involved in worship. Oh yeah, I'm one of these.
I think what David is getting to, what came up for me was it's kind of the essence of change management, which is what are people feel overwhelmed
Feeling.
sometimes by change.
Yes.
And are afraid of change, whether they attach the name fear to what they're feeling.
Uh-huh.
But rule number 1 in change management organizations is, okay, what are people losing
Yeah.
in the change process?
Right.
And often that's an intangible, it's around feelings. So I don't know what the venue is, rather than for more information, what is the venue for people to share actively how they're feeling?
Right.
And many people may not unless they're actually asked.
Right. Which is partly why we're having this meeting, because I wanted to ask you, you know, where are we with this? And at the annual parish meeting, you know, there will be opportunity. Anybody who chooses to come, you know, what are our thoughts about this? How are we feeling about this?
Yeah, I guess that would be one of my questions, and because I know you said, is when we hear people stating any kind of frustrations, and it seems like a lot of times all I hear is negative things.
Camille, take your mask
I'm
off.
sorry, I'd like to know if we hear negative things or frustrations, who should we be taking those to? Because it seems like that I get hit with that a lot, and I tend to want to immediately defend and you know, so that's where I was thinking about what Gina said, is that there's some of us that don't want anything to change, and there are others of us that don't like, you know, don't like what's happening, and we just want to talk about it. That's a colloquial view, but, so I'm just trying to think about how we can best talk about people that are having frustrations with change, or confusion, or I just don't get what's going on.
Well, I mean, I think it depends on what it is. I mean, if there is, you know, if there's some sense that, well, the church isn't responding, it doesn't seem to know that I've been to the hospital and nobody called. If it's something like that, then, you know, then it's Kitty or me, right? I mean, and this part of, we need to be able to publish enough of this structure, not with every bit of detail, but where people can know, have a name associated with who do I talk to about this, you know? If somebody was griping to me about how loud it is in church before we begin worship. You know, an old tradition, a long-held tradition in our churches, Episcopal churches, is quiet before, as we gather. There's a lot of life in this community. We've just come out of 3 years of pandemic where we have not been able to be with each other and talk. So I chalk it up to that in part. But also, there's generational change that just happens to us. And it sneaks up on us in small ways, and that's one of them, I think.
Great silent meditation time for the 7:45 service.
Yes, that's right. If you really want quiet, you can come to 7:45. It's very quiet.
Wait, how about and we want young people at other services? We want kids in here being noisy before church.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So right, you bring up an issue, you bring up any issue like that, and you could have, you know, you have people who say, "Amen, why can't we go back to being quiet before church?" And others who say, "No, but we want the kid." You know, it's that is the nature of being a community, and it's the nature of change too. So, I mean, I think, you know, as any one of us in leadership, listening to, hearing little complaints about things, first of all, we have to make an assessment. Is this like, I don't know if it's, I can't remember if DEFCON 5 is really bad or 1, but is it 1 or 5? You know, if it's something big, and you can, or that person is a leader and is connected to a lot of other people and has a way of influencing a lot of other thoughts, you ought to bring it to somebody, because, you know, but even better than that, tell them to go and talk to the person. I mean, so then you're not triangulating the issue. But if that isn't going to work, you can still convey, even not necessarily with sharing the name. Like, this has been kind of, I've been hearing this. And
Sarah, I would say that there's a yes and when I was asking the question, what's the venue for people to share how they're feeling? It's with every person
Yes.
in this room.
Yes.
So that when somebody is doing that with you, you are the
You represent
person.
the church.
Yes. So
That's right.
okay, tell me how you're feeling.
Yes.
And what I'm hearing is
Yeah.
every time we talk about something that's changing.
Yes,
And
yes,
just normalize,
Yeah.
it's hard.
yeah,
I'm hearing that this is hard for you right now. Please tell me what's going on with you right now. Tell me how you're feeling. Even if it doesn't, if there's nothing else that has to be done, they felt
Yep.
heard and seen by somebody in the group.
yes. And then I think sharing that back with other leadership so that if there's some response that can be made, then it will be made. You know, we're all learning. We literally are building this as we go. And so it's not going to be perfect. It is going to be messy. And we do need to, it's okay to be a little unhappy and to be confused, you know, along the way.
I think your point though about the whole DEFCON system, which if you're going to use that, of course.
I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding.
I don't know.
But it's good because there's a difference between somebody that needs to be sent directly to the person who can help them and just kind of holy craving, right? You know, sort of like complaining about the weather.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can really do about it. You all enjoy complaining about it, me especially. It's the same in church, and you know, there's always going to be something that you just kind of just want to complain about, just to complain, and that's normal. We all do it. We all do it. But then there's also, like you said, serious issues and serious concerns that need to be addressed, and sending people directly to the person that can address that, versus I say, like, I don't know if there's necessarily defined way to address concerns, but there's some really good ways not to address concerns. There's some bad ways to address concerns. So just like gossiping about it and letting it fester would not be healthy.
And Keneal, as you said, wanting to defend, you don't need to do that. You know, it's,
Well, I like what Gina said, because I tend to want to say, well, you know, everybody's not going to be pleased with everything all the time. I want to say, well, maybe you need to find a new church. And it's sort of run between those two.
right.
Somebody says, well, it's like, get over it. Move
Yeah.
on.
But Gina's very right that this is the thing about change, is that it's disruptive. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, Steve and I were just talking about this earlier this week. We are all going through, there is so much anxiety just floating in the air in our world right now.
That is true.
Between pandemic and the economy, the global economy, war, the political climate in our culture, in the church, rifts in the church. There's just so much. And then we come to church to pray, and church is all in a tumble, right? Everything's changing here too. And that can get, you know, and the first response usually to fear is anger. It's not fear. The first response is usually we get angry. So it's gonna happen, from irritant to downright like threatening to leave the church. It's all part of the norm, and I do think that's saying, I hear you. Okay, I hear you, and you're on the vestry, so you could say, would you like me to talk with Mother Sarah about this? Or, you know, if you do think it's serious enough that it needs a response. But, you know, the one thing you do want to discourage is unnamed bombs, you know, where somebody's saying a big problem, but they refuse to be identified. That's not healthy. And so, you know, you have to encourage people to, I can talk to Mother Sarah, but are you willing to talk to her once I've started the topic,
Well,
you know?
the open question is, what would you like to do about that?
Yeah, but they may not know. So, you know, it's at least it begins a conversation.
What would you-
Yeah.
I'm hearing your.
Yeah.
Back just a few years ago when I was on that street, we had a meeting, and Betty, I know you were there. We had one of the deacons, I think, from the diocese come and gave us kind of an overview of the Episcopal Church across the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And these growing pains we're incredibly fortunate.
Yes.
I think the number was over, I think it was 60% of Episcopal churches don't have a full-time priest in the U.S. And here, we've got full-time, part-time, current
growing pains are, it's painful. It's hard.
It's a good thing.
change.
Yeah.
Us old Episcopalians are.
That's right.
suffer the
Yeah.
activity about those changes. But, I'm embracing the changes and enjoying the changes because we're growing. It's like my family, we have 6 grandchildren now. That is beautiful.
Mhm.
It's hard work, it's
Yes.
But we're loving it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe some of that helps too as we answer those questions about,
Katie,
I hear you.
Very good point.
But,
Yep.
But, where are we fortunate that, where are some of these people coming from? The church is closing down the street.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I just, my knowledge is.
Mhm.
Good problems to have.
Yeah,
Yes,
good
that's
problems to have.
exactly right.
Yeah.
But I will throw out one thing. Hear them well before you say, oh, but aren't we fortunate?
Yes, that's true.
Oh, yes.
That's true.
Hear them well and feel their pain.
Yeah.
Because they're back here,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
not up here.
Yeah.
And they don't want to hear that.
Yeah. That's very true.
So it's timing.
Yeah.
When are they ready to hear that?
Yeah. Very true.
But
All
I think
right.
it's nice for us to hear that.
It's great for us to hear
For us to,
that. Yes.
to know that, like, as if we hear people complaining, like, to understand. that
Yes.
We can live through the people complaining to us because we know it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's a sign of good things. All right. Look, we're even finishing before the 2-hour mark. I know this has been so much information. I really appreciate you taking the time in a June Sunday to get caught up on some of this stuff. We're going to try to take some break in July in the sense of very few meetings. But we'll be picking it right back up in August again. So, and in the meantime, we'll be doing lots of little stuff. So we'll be in touch.
Good shot.
Huh?
Godly Place started with almost a dozen kids.
I know, isn't that awesome? Yay! Yes.
Can't be the worst thing to do, lesson 2.
See, the complaining starts. Thank you all.